The only correctional facility, Her Majesty's Prison, located in the scenic eastern hills of Tortola and which serves the entire territory of the British Virgin Islands, is making laudable headway in not only operating as a penal institution but also as a change agent. And maybe the picturesque and lush surroundings inadvertently helps inmates to cope behind the metal fencing meant to keep them in. The correctional facility located in Balsam Gut spearheads several rehabilitative programs geared at assisting inmates with turning their lives around, as well as righting their wrongs to become productive citizens after gaining their freedom. In an exclusive interview with JTV News following the launch of its newest vocational and educational program, Superintendent of Prisons David Foote outlined some of the success stories. Chief among them is an initiative which empowers persons found delinquent by the courts in paying child maintenance to honor their obligations.
We've done this in conjunction with the senior magistrate because obviously we had to have her help and assistance and permission to be able to realise this. And so what we said was we would look at getting employment for prisoners who'd not paid their child maintenance, but the monies that they earned while in prison would go 100% to pay what they owed. So that would be going to their children, the children who should have been getting the money in the first place. A lot of that employment was jobs that they had previously, so they didn't lose their job, and so they didn't end up in a position where you come to prison for 6 months, you go out, you've not got a job, you can't pay your fine, you come back to prison again. It's a revolving circle. And I think last time we had 5 prisoners released. I've got paperwork for a further 2. But that programme seems to have been working well, and employers, and certainly some of the previous employers of those persons, have taken to that, and so that's made that quite easy to do.
Other rehabilitative programs target sexual and violent offenders, substance abusers, as well as restorative justice involving juveniles, where the offender makes amends in person to the victims of their crime and restitution.
With violent offenders, we're looking at anger management. We're looking at those offenders understanding the effects of their crime on the general public and on their victims. The course that we use predominantly for that is called Partners for Peace. The sex offender treatment programme we were given by the National Offender Management Service in the UK. They came over here for 2 weeks and trained our staff. That programme deals with all the non-psychological parts of sexual offending, so the reasons and the urges that men have, how that isn't respectable or responsible, about how you view other persons or individuals, not as objects but as human beings. We only started that last year, but 10 prisoners have completed that programme, and 1 has gone on to gain parole, and that's pretty significant.
In terms of the restorative justice program involving the juvenile offenders, how many participants do you have in that program right now?
We've had 14 young men go through that programme, and I'm very pleased to say that so far only 2 of those prisoners have come, or those young men I should say, have fallen back into problems with the police.
There are 132 prisoners housed at Her Majesty's Prison, and just 3 of them are women, a fact for which the prison boss beams, and if the lobby of the female block is anything to go by.
One of the very pleasing things about custody in the Virgin Islands is that the female offenders here are all very stable. I would be used to something very different in the UK. I would be used to high levels of self-harm and drug misuse, but we don't really see that here, which allows us to do a lot more work with the female offenders, and they are allowed to do all the programmes that the male offenders take part in.